Good morning. Well, good afternoon, actually. It's 12:01. Hi, I'm Camilla Rogers. Welcome to this power half hour this afternoon on the 7th of November. Where has the year gone? As I said, I'm Camilla Rogers. I'm the founder of a business called 50/50. And for those of you I don't know today, I help ambitious people and organizations to build high performance cultures and sustain that kind of, energy without burning out. So today, and I would love if you could let me know if you can actually see my screen, because when I've got the share on, I can never really tell on these broadcast webinars. So I'm just going to come out, just check the chat box quickly, and can you tell me what you can see? Because that would just be really helpful as I am here. Can you see just the deck? Is that right? Sandy, thank you for coming back. Yeah, you can see the deck. Okay, fabulous. So that is brilliant. I am going to keep that on there for now. And I have got another little comment pop up so I can see the comments. Brilliant. Okay, so you can see me, you can see my deck. Let's get going. So the reason I wanted to do this session is because I talked to so many people in HR. No deck. Okay, we've got no deck. Okay, so the wonders of tech when you're running a session like this. Let's share that. Hopefully you can see that now, and I am going to crack on because I think I can see that. So the reason I talked to so many people in HR about this is because stress and pressure and that high kind of desire to perform are real massive issues. And when we go into organizations and we coach people, often what's coming up from the employee standpoint as well is that pressure to perform. How can we sustain the pace? How do we keep going with the moving goalposts, with the ever need to pivot, with the high growth kind of environments that we're in? And it's wonderful when we've got capacity to go into an organization and do that transformation. But today I just wanted to give you a few sort of tools and techniques and almost a window in to some of the work that could be potentially a partnership down the road with us. From my standpoint, it's all about building high performance in a way that is really sustainable. So thinking about it from this Rewire framework, which is something that I have designed and created for a lot of different organizations. And it's a whole kind of acronym that, as you can see, it's something we work really closely with different organizations to tailor and nuance slightly. But ultimately, we want to be able to think about the performance journey around these core pillars. So being able to spot those early signs of fatigue, that performance drag that can come when we've got friction within the organization, that's really important. We want to be able to lead with that compassion, with that composure, but also have a clear head under pressure to be able to know what our high impact, high control roles are and opportunities are, to get rid of the stuff that's low control, low impact, to do, delegate, delete. If you've been following my emails this week, you'll know I'm big passion on sort of, filtering the work that we have to do in order to get that max value from the time and the energy that we invest. And on that point, thinking about the W in Rewire is really around how do we manage our energy as opposed to thinking about time management. So we want to avoid decision fatigue. We all get there in all of our roles, but being able to prioritize effectively is a really misunderstood value, I think, from many a person within the workplace. And it's something that we can really optimize from a performance standpoint. Reconnecting with who we are, our why, and what drives us day to day is a big part of the work. So understanding that value piece as well and that alignment, and that feeds into ensuring that we don't hit burnout as well, as I will touch on. Understanding how to reframe our thinking, but also redefining performance can be really powerful and something that's really important as part of the program. To challenge those outdated measures of success, doing for doing's sake, let's focus in on what really, actually adds value and drives that kind of sustainable high performance. And then it's about, as you would expect, elevating and embedding, actually how do we take what we're learning and actually put it into practice day in, day out. So I'm going to stop the share for a little bit because I'm going to talk more around some of the concepts of burnout. I'm really interested in this area because I think there's such an opportunity here to help intervene early. I think a lot of companies wait for the crash and burn for ourselves, especially people like you in HR who are standing up and showing up for everyone else. And today is a bit about topping up your cup as much as it is about having ideas for your business. So when it comes to burnout, drop in the text, let me know, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about it? Because burnout isn't always what everyone thinks it is. In fact, the WHO definition, so the World Health Organization, see it as purely a phenomenon within the workplace. And from my standpoint, that isn't really, I don't think that's encompassing enough. I think actually we can have situations where work can actually be okay, and we can be performing well at work, and we can be doing what we need to be doing. However, it might be our extenuating circumstances that can really pull us underground. It could be caring responsibilities, it could be relationship breakdowns, it could be anything to do with our mental health or our mental fitness. And once we're in those situations, it can be really difficult, or hard, I should say, just to try and get yourself back into sort of focus area. So a couple of people are saying, becoming overwhelmed inside and outside of work. Absolutely. And it's about understanding that, isn't it, on the sort of stress scale. When does overwhelm tip into high stress, chronic stress, and then ultimately burnout? So let me share again. And one of the things that I think we need to do is to think about, where are we on the scale? So we have this space where we want to be calm, we want to be clear thinking, we want to have that balanced energy and that kind of, excellent number of hours sleep every night, at least 7 or 8. Doesn't always happen. I'm very aware of that myself. And then there's that place where we were, phased into pressure and onwards, outwards into strain and burnout. So the pressure, as you'll know from the pressure performance curve, and that I'll come on to in a moment, if you haven't heard of that before, you'll probably recognize it when you see it. This is where we kind of get to that optimal place, the Goldilocks moment. And that pressure is what we need. We need pressure to motivate. We need pressure to excite. We need pressure to engage. We need pressure to sort of make us feel good in our own bodies. But too much of a good thing can lead to a bad thing. So short-term stress we can take in small doses, but that long-term exposure to high stress is what leads to chronic stress and ultimately can push us over the edge. So when I talk about the scale, and you can see at the bottom here, I always talk about the scale of 0 to 10. And did you know that there is actually a type of burnout called bore-out, with bore-out being that very low end of the spectrum where we're 0 to 2 out of 10. And this would be a place of lack of motivation, totally dreading going to work, totally not in the zone to be productive, to perform. And that can be for a number of reasons. It can be because we are bored, and it's literally from the term bore out, we're doing repetitive, mundane tasks. We don't feel inspired or excited by them. So that leads to that sort of disenfranchisement and ultimately detachment. It can also be that we're being really underutilized from our own skill set and our own potential. So it can be really upsetting to be doing a job where you're adding this much value. I talk to a lot of colleagues in HR, and sometimes with this job market we've seen at the moment as well, people applying for jobs way below their pay grade and way below their expertise and their experience. And if that feels like you, or if that's been someone then that can really put you in a place where you could be quite prone to a bore-out experience. So it's something to be mindful of. Then you think about the healthy zone. So that's highlighted in green here. And you can see that optimal performance at the top of the curve. Now, this is obviously ideally where we want to be. But realistically in life happens. We have things going on, and that will push us into the higher end of the scale. Now, what I want us to kind of experience here is just the reality that we've got a space where 8, 9, 10 out of 10 can feel like a really normal place to hang out. When we're constantly always doing and delivering, the 8, 9, 10 can become our new baseline. So we stop to realize that this is not a really healthy zone. And that makes us even more prone to fall off the cliff. And 10 plus would be what we would refer to as off the cliff into a space of burnout. So I'm really conscious that we all need to reflect on where we sit day to day on the curve. And it will change. There's no 2 days will ever be the same. And having the tools to recognize, seeing ourselves as the elastic band that is stretched when we are pulled to a point of being really brittle and ready to snap, that is a good warning sign for us. And we need to think about some of those signs and symptoms of burnout as well, because they are everywhere. Yet people will say, oh, it really crept up on me. It just came over me one day and I just couldn't cope anymore. Or I was drinking that glass of water and I just physically couldn't pick up my hand. Or I was walking down the stairs and I just couldn't keep going. And it's because we've got to a place of nervous system shutdown with burnout. And burnout, whilst it's an occupational phenomenon in the eyes of the World Health Organization, I'd say it's a whole body phenomenon and actually something that impacts us, in every in every facet of our life. So being really aware of where we sit on this curve can be a great check-in point. And it can also bring us back to a space of where we think, okay, so if I'm not spending a lot of time recalibrating and bringing myself back to a healthy zone, ultimately I'm a ticking time bomb to fall off the cliff. And that's kind of where we want to get to. I'm not going to talk about this too much today because this is the stress bucket. I'm pretty sure some of you would have seen it, but I just wanted to share a visual. It's a sort of nice way that we try and engage with employees within organisations like yours, where we can kind of visually show how stress can build up. Many of you will have heard of this already, and I like this one because it integrates the trauma trigger tap as well, which I think, if you don't follow her already, Dr. Juliet Young is really fantastic. And we have a license with her to use a lot of her imagery within our training sessions, which is really powerful because she does a great job at making it very, very real. So we all have a capacity to stress, as you'll know, and our capacity will be very different depending on where we are and what we go through. And that will be filled up every single morning by the small stresses that we have that just fill it up naturally, and then the big ones that come in by way of things that we can control or we can't control. And that kind of circle of control plays into this as well. So it could be world events, or it could be a big deadline, or it could be a family situation. Ultimately, these will fill our bucket up with more stress. I always use this with clients when I'm coaching, sort of the visual image of the glass, where you're filling up literally, and I get them to sometimes write what are the stresses that we have in, to the point where you can visually see it overflowing. And that's what we want not to happen. So we have to find ways to release the water. And that's what this diagram is showing really nicely, isn't it? So you can see the healthy coping mechanisms on the one side, which we would be used to seeing. And then you can see, obviously, the unhealthy mechanisms on the other side. And we need to find those ways to ensure that we're creating opportunities to not just effectively putting a little hose pipe back into the top by coping in an unhealthy way. And it's very easy to fall down into these habitual routes because of the way the brain is wired. And it's a whole other topic for another day, but the whole neuroscience behind burnout and what happens to the brain is a big area of the sort of rewire program that we talk about, because that is where we can create new neural pathways, but we have to understand why we can't do that, and ultimately why we can't think our way out of burnout in the first place. So I'm going to stop share and take a pause for a moment. Being mentally exhausted, yet another one. So really clear signs and symptoms: absolute bone crunching fatigue, total exhaustion. You will just genuinely not feel rested. The first thing to go when we have high levels of stress is our sleep. And our sleep is our ultimate way of removing water from the stress bucket. So we get to a place where we're in this vicious cycle where we're not sleeping, and we're probably getting those nocturnal panic attacks or the 3 a.m., 1 a.m. wake ups where our brain is wired in a way where we haven't completed the mental loops from the day. Therefore, we're not able to download and process. We're more in a space where we're actually continuing on our thinking and continuing on our doing, because we haven't been able to, I guess, pack away the day in the right way. And that happens a lot, again, linking into some of the neuroscientific behaviors that we have in those situations. There's a big one about the loss of sense of self. You might have heard of this. This is a real sort of detachment that we might find that creeps up. We might physically remove ourselves from socials and situations in work where we feel like we would normally want to participate. And also we might not want to hang out with our friends because we can't deal with the conversations of how are you doing, and you haven't got the mental energy, let alone the physical energy, to show up and actually either, handle the conversation or avoid the conversation. Can be equally as difficult on that front. So being really aware of some of these things, but we can also have physical symptoms. You could have like really tight shoulders all the time, a constant migraine, perhaps IBS issues. Stress and the body are very much intertwined. We need to think about it somatically. So one of the things to do, even now in the middle of a session, because you've probably been running all week, is, just to put both feet on the floor, notice where your shoulders are, and take a really deep breath from the diaphragm. And I do a lot of breath work, and I think it's really important to know that some of the tips, and it's going to be a couple of the hacks I give you later, will touch on that. But just even to take 3 nourishing breaths where we close our eyes and we just deep inhale in, but also exhale out longer than we are in the space of actually breathing in. It just helps to send the message to our brain that we're calming down. And that's what we need to get in the habit of doing, is interrupting. Because pressure, when we feel it, there's 2 ways of looking at it. One of it is sort of like the managing and handling stress, and one is the way of like optimizing our energy and really thinking, how do I want to invest my time? And I would rather say, how would we rather invest our energy? So that's a big topic in itself. I was in with Trip Drinks recently doing a session for them on prioritization and maximizing impact, so almost to optimize that performance. And they're really busy, scale up culture. It's the guys that are behind the drinks with the botanicals in and the magnesium. You might have seen them. They're very big on social media. They're sort of taking over America by storm as well. And they're a really great team. It's just they're so busy with meetings. They are back to back with meetings. So to try and carve out time for white space in the diary is really important. So we need to have headspace where we are able to be productive day to day. So we need to think about our priority matrix. And again, I can only touch on these because of the time frame today, but thinking about what tasks am I high impact and am I high control, because that quadrant, out of all the other options that we can have, being low control, low impact, high control, low impact, whatever the 4 options that we have, we want to be focusing in and lasering in our energy spend on tasks that we have to do that are high impact and high control. And we want to be doing those at the time of day when we have most energy to give. And for women in particular, also beyond the day, we want to be looking at the times of the month and the cycle as to when we are, and accepting that some days we may just be better off focusing on some lower impact tasks that actually are going to take less from us energetically. And equally, there are other times when we just know that maybe we're more of a morning person, or maybe we get more of our sort of energy after lunch. Whatever that is when we should zone in on those kind of core tasks to kind of prioritize that performance level, but minimize the pressure we're going to be feeling thereafter. So we know burnout isn't about being busy or tired. We know it's a chronic stress response. We know some of the early signs being that cynicism, emotional flatness. We've got some other ones. We talked about detachment, and we've got the brain fog is also something else that can really come in. So you can imagine when you're trying to think about these high performance areas, it can be a bit of a drag. So we have to be really effective with our time and energy management. So it's not about necessarily thinking, what do I need to do in every hour of the day? Although what I would say is really great practice is to work at what you can do for short bursts of time. So be it the Pomodoro technique, which is really favoured with quite a lot of our clients, and that's when you do short, sharp bursts of 20-minute focuses, have a quick break, and then do another one, and it continues up until a larger break. You want to be thinking, actually, there are stats that show 40% of productivity leaks come from switching tasks. And energy leaks is what I talk a lot about, 50-50. And actually, if any of you are interested, I've got an energy leak quiz you can do to see where one of your energy leaks actually come through as the key area from the Rewire framework, which one would be the biggest one for you. It's quite insightful. It just gives you a bit of a high-level overview. But starting to think, where am I spending my energy? And where is my energy leaking most right now? These will be some good precursors to knowing where you might end up pushing yourself too far up that stress scale. And that's what we really want to avoid. So the energy awareness is like what's draining you, but what's like topping up your cup, what's filling you up. So going back to the stress bucket earlier, connection and laughter can be really good for the soul. They can really lift us. And actually, if that's what's topping you up right now, that's what you need to spend more energy doing. Because sometimes we've just got to a point where our cup has run dry and we just need to, replenish ourselves in a way that gives us some more energy to go back and fight the day. So take 10 seconds on a regular basis to check in with you. Like, where is your energy level out of 10? Like, what's been leaking mostly this week? And you can refer back to the kind of pillars that we looked at earlier as well. And remember, you can't fix what you can't feel. So we need to name it to tame it. And those sort of ideas of really being conscious and intentional with where I am, this is my quick energy audit, this is what I've got to give. Okay, I'm going to give my energy to these tasks because they're high impact, high control. And then I'm going to kind of think about the rest of it. Another great hack is to think about, and if you're on my mail list this week for Stress Awareness Week, you'll have been getting a daily hack to manage your energy better and to better handle stress. One of them is the do, delete, or delegate filter that I love to put even the tasks on the high impact, high control through for clients. So I think that's really important as well. What can we do? And we should only be doing high impact, high control most of the time. What can we delegate? So that could be high impact stuff as well, but you might not have the control on that. So you might want to delegate that to someone on your team so it still gets done, but ultimately, it's off your plate personally. Then there'll be things that we can just delete because we just don't need to do them. And I would argue things where you've got multiple people in the same team, in the same meeting, or your meetings are going on for over 50 minutes or over 25 minutes, that's time you can recover for recovery. Because the big part of this is saying, whether you adapt to the different models of working to avoid productivity leaks is one thing, but we should all have clarity in our diary where we're either doing meetings, deep focus where we should be not interrupted, and we should have recovery in there, and we should guard recovery in the same way we guard revenue. And that is critical. McKinsey did a report and they showed 10 to 15% performance uplifts for people who are proactively in recovery mode during their day. And these were high performance leaders. The same concept of what we would know to be true for athletes is very, very true for leaders and high performers. And in order to sustain that level of growth for the business, but also performance for the individual and the team, we have to see recovery as important. And there's a reframe here that's really key, that recovery doesn't have to mean rest. Rest doesn't have to mean doing nothing. And I think that's super important. If you just reflect on that for a moment, lots of people think and have the mindset, I certainly did in my 20s, I can rest when I'm dead, or I haven't got time. I've got to do this. But actually, if we can start to see either that white space in our diary or space that we put in our diary, we colour code to purple or to orange or whatever it is and say, that's my recovery time. For me, that looks like a saxophone class on a Monday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. To me, it means taking a walkie-talkie coaching session with someone I've been coaching for a long time and making sure that I get some nature in my week at the same time. It means taking half an hour away from my desk to eat a bowl of salad or a bowl of soup with no screen. It means walking my son to school and back and getting some form of split when I work from home, just to divide the getting up and starting work in the same four walls. So you'll find your own ways to think about that, but I think that's really, really important. Now, we've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to give you a couple of tools. So one of them would be the power pause. Now, I think pausing is so important. As a coach, there's always a tendency to want to fill gaps. People feel uncomfortable, and even our coaching clients, if any of you are coaches as well in your roles, often that is the case, or in your conversations in the nature of what you do in HR, I would say people want to fill silences because they feel awkward and uncomfortable. But allowing that space is really powerful. It also gives you a chance to respond rather than react. So if you're being asked to do more, or if you're being can I have 2 minutes with you? We all know that those 2 minutes are probably the only window you've got in your day to have a break. And actually, if you give and you don't have your boundaries in place, you're going to end up over giving, which puts us in a place of risk around burnout as well. So you want to re-engage that prefrontal cortex part of the brain to get into a calm and clear mindset. And you want to be thinking, you know, I don't want to have to kind of like take on all for everyone. So this is about trying to get things off your plate, perhaps more in that delegate or delay space, because we know that when stress hits a part of our brain, it kind of hijacks our whole emotional regulation and the way that our whole system runs, and then you lose control. So we want to do 3 breaths where we have a longer exhale out, and then we have a 3-second silence before we would respond. And this is what I call the power pause. It just gives you a moment. So you might need to do this on your own, you know, a few times to get used to doing it. But equally, if you're in a meeting, you can easily do that before you respond to a question, or actually very more often than not, it might be an email as well. So it's very good when emotions are high, and it can be like gold dust when we're kind of, it's like so important, you want that this technique when you're in negotiation mode as well. So it's really important. There's a lot of negotiation that goes on in your roles. Also, I want you to think about what's yours versus what's theirs. So I want micro boundaries, macro impact, and that's really important. Giving yourself time to create the pause, even if you physically can't in that moment because you're talking to your CEO or to someone of senior influence within your business. Let me get back to you on that. I can give you my full focus tomorrow, but right now I'm committed to this particular work. Is that okay? And actually being clear and intentional with your communication, you know, you can often win yourself back a little bit of time, and you're often the sponge within the organization, soaking and mopping up everything. So having boundaries that aren't barriers are really important, but also communicating through them is really helpful. And you want to have that kind of space to pause and reset. So a little whistle stop for you today, but I want you to be mindful of what burnout is, where you sit on the stress scale, how you can kind of use breath work and tools to kind of pause in the moment, but also how you can set your boundaries up and think about the work that you're doing from an impact and control standpoint. So lots of ways. I mean, usually each of these areas we would go into in quite a lot of detail, and I will be running up follow-up sessions where we might just zone in on one area specifically. So keep in touch with me if that's of interest. What I did want to do before you run off is just to share a couple of QR codes with you. So if you wouldn't mind sharing any feedback, I would always be super grateful. You can see a QR code there. I think it's really helpful to know where where you would like to hear more things about, because it can help me tailor the next sessions that are coming up as well. Also, I would love to know what your biggest takeaway is when we're doing short power sessions like this. It's good to know what's the one thing that you take away. We're also running a lot of programs here at 50/50, and we've got a priority list at the moment purely for the people that are engaging, doing some of the masterclasses and talking to me personally around the coaching. And we've got loads of things coming up for 2025. So if you're on that list, you're going to get preferential rates, you're going to get early access. And I'm also doing a round of calls over the next few weeks to really kind of get clear on what we can do to support you. So if that sounds like you and you'd love to explore these areas more deeply for yourself or for your team, we have group coaching, one-to-one coaching, training sessions that we can do in sort of bite-sized hours or half days. And for us, it's all about that mental fitness and driving that high performance, but sustainably and with compassion. So thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed it and taken something away today for your afternoon. Have an incredible weekend. Make sure you take some of that action to rest and recharge. And I will chat to you very, very soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.